Welcome back. I'm Charles Lewis, the Austin area realtor who brings you topics and discussions that will help you make better decisions when you buy, sell, or invest in real estate. Today, I'm with my friend Justin Holler from David Weekley Homes, Building Your Own Lot. Justin, thank you so much for coming back talking with us again today.
Always a pleasure here, Charles.
Today, I want to talk about something that I think anyone who's interested in buying a home should be aware of. Whether they're building their own home, like a build on your lot option, or they're purchasing a resale, and that is the types of soil in the Austin metro area. And I'm sure you can confirm from a builder's point of view is you have different processes and techniques depending upon the type of soil on the lot that you're going to build the house, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Different processes, and there's vastly different soil compositions in Austin. Now, you're not going to have a drastic difference from across the street, but when you talk about building in Marble Falls as opposed to South Austin, you have vastly different soils composition there, and that does impact how the foundation of your home is designed, engineered, and then built.
Well, one way I've heard it described, correct me if I'm wrong, 35 being a dividing line. On the east side, you've got what they call the Blackland Prairies, which is a very clay-based soil.
Expansive soils, yes.
Okay, that's your word. And then on the other side, to the west, you begin getting into the hill country. And by the time you move up into like the Marble Falls, Lakeway, Lago Vista, it's a lot of solid rock underneath that topsoil.
A lot of bedrock, limestone. Marble Falls, you have dolomite, which is virtually one of the stronger rocks that we're ever try to dig into or build on.
Really? Okay. Well, let's do this. So someone who is in the market to buy a home is at least aware of this. Let's consider both options. Let's say we're building, let's first on the clay-based soil, and then we'll go into the
rock.
Yeah. On that clay-based soil, what are some things, number one, that you would do before site prep, and then while you're building it or before you're laying that foundation?
Well, before we build any home, we do what is known as a soils analysis. Okay. Essentially, we have a company the foundation company is going to send off the design of our foundation, is going to come out there and they're going to do a 15-foot deep borehole into the earth's surface, about 6 inches wide. And they're going to test the soil composition at each foot down to determine what that soil composition is made of.
Okay.
You talk about the different kind of soils, and I think to understand really what that means, the main thing we're looking for is going to be water-induced movement of the ground.
Okay.
Essentially, when you have a standard foundation slab on grade, we do a post-tension cable foundation, and you don't want that foundation to move. You want it to stay sturdy,
right.
Solid as a foundation. We're going to do beams underneath. We're going to dig trenches into the earth, and those beams are going to be filled with concrete. That's going to create almost a checkerboard pattern on the bottom of your foundation. It's going to help keep that foundation from moving left to right, front to back. But how deep we go with those beams, and if those beams need to be reinforced, or if we need to do something known as pillars, where we're actually putting like the big concrete posts into the ground, is going to depend completely on the soil composition of your particular home site.
What about underneath this concrete? I mean, it's one thing just to dig into the soil, whatever it is, and pour the concrete, but isn't there a process, particularly on this clay-based soil? If I'm understanding it, that soil has a tendency to kind of contract and expand.
The whole foundation is surrounded by one beam, essentially. Okay. We dig a trench around, and then we do, like I said, the checkerboards. Well, what you have is that when it rains on the outside of the home, that water seeps into the ground. And if you reach bedrock rather quickly, the water stops seeping, and then it kind of just filters away and goes around the foundation because you have those beams in there that it hits.
Okay.
If you have this expansive clay soil that is going to allow more water absorption, meaning the water is going deeper into the earth's surface, if it goes below those beams, you have that water seeping underneath there, thus making that firm foundation it's on now a soggy foundation that would allow solid ground into a soggy ground that causes that foundation's weight to push down. That's when you have cracking or failing foundations. When we do the soils analysis to determine that soil composition, we're given a report saying this home site has a very high level, medium level, or low level of soil-induced movement. Based on that report, we then design that foundation.
Gotcha.
So, like you said, East Austin or Southern Austin, you have these variables, the soil that's going to mean that the water is a likelihood of going underneath this foundation and causing movement. So what we're going to do is we're going to design a foundation that mitigates that.
I had actually done a video for anyone who may have seen it, or actually I can put the link right here, is Bradshaw crossed with Lenore. From what I'm understanding, they have had after the fact issues with their foundations because their practice was to, instead of doing that soil analysis on each individual lot, we did one for the street or one for a section, and that is not as specific, I guess, as it needs to be.
That's not an uncommon practice to do a certain number of test holes in order to make a generalized assumption and determination of what's going to be in that subdivision. If you take the four corners of a subdivision, you may get different readings, but if those readings are all in line, the assumption is that, well, we've captured the borders of this area. Why would we assume that the middle of this area is any different?
Maybe. The reason I was bringing this up is if someone were doing the build on your lot option, you wouldn't have that uncertainty.
And I think that's where the soils discussion really takes more of a turn, is when you get into the more of the custom or build on your lot type builder, because you're not purchasing a home in a community where this stuff has been done. You're purchasing a piece of land.
Right.
And you don't really have any idea what's going on there. So, and I've had several friends. I had a buddy of mine who bought a lot in Austin and built the house on it. And he, through their whole process, realized he had to have like 35 piers drilled into the ground, and it was going to cost him like $150,000 of extra foundation reinforcement because the neighborhood was built on fill dirt. So essentially, they excavated a bunch of land and they put it here, 50, 60 years ago. That dirt kind of settled, but it wasn't natural. It was moved from somewhere else. There's actually a neighborhood up in like near Killeen, but it's like a whole mountain was built. It's fill dirt, and all the homes in this mountain or hill all had to have deep beams because it's all fill dirt. It's like when they did a quarry, they excavated a quarry, and this is where they put all the dirt.
Gotcha.
It created like a man-made mountain over time, or man-made hill, where then someone bought that and then built a home on it. It happens over time, and so this is a really good due diligence factor in order to help mitigate any possible foundation issue.
The example you just spoke of is, from what I'm hearing, is the dirt is very loose or not very solid. Compare that with the opposite. When you talked about Marble Falls having, what was the type of rock you said?
Dolomite.
Dolomite, which is
It's like a marble. It's essentially a marble.
Really?
Marble Falls,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So it's a very, very, it's a dark, almost black, dark gray type of rock. The issues you run into there is if you have a septic system or something like that, trying to chip into dolomite, it takes you 10 times as long as it would just normal limestone rock.
To actually dig the hole.
Yes,
I got
you hit bedrock. I've had crews, like I had one out not in Marble Falls, but in the Bertram area, where they were trying to bury a propane tank and came in and dug 3 feet down and hit bedrock. And we're not burying it here, so we had to get somebody else to come out and bust the rock out to bury the tank. So
how does that impact the foundation of a home?
Ideally, you want to be on bedrock. Ideally, you want that, billions of years of rock that hasn't moved to be on your foundation of your home. It really affects how deep the beams are. It also affects, like I said, we do a post-tension cable foundation, so there's cables that run through the foundation. And once the foundation is poured and is dried and is cured, a crew comes back out and takes those cables and stresses them. They pull them. I think it's like 3,000 pounds, 30,000 pounds. I can't remember exactly the numbers. But they stress those cables and they cut them off. And so now you have a very, very small gap hole that allows for strengthening of the foundation and very little movement in there. So you're creating kind of hollow cores in there. You'll have, where from 10 to 20 to 30 different cross sections of these cables. And when you stress them, that's what's kind of creating that foundation to kind of almost like compress on itself and create a much firmer foundation. On the edges, you may have to do extra cables in order to create a more firm foundation to offset that movement. So when the earth pushes up, if it absorbs water, it's pushing up, the foundation's pushing back down, and you just want the foundation to win that battle.
Well, let me ask you this question. Is that based on what you described, and thank you so much for the detail, because that helps me and hopefully folks out here watching as well understand the challenges when building on these different types of soils. But let's say someone is looking at a resale home,
Okay.
and they're able to at least identify by general area. that they probably had to contend with either the clay-based soil or the rock. Would it be safe to say that there's more of a risk of a foundation shifting on the clay base versus the?
I think ultimately you're going to have more of a risk, yes. But if you're buying a resale home in some of those areas, I would definitely look at the age of the home. I mean, if a home's been there for 40 or 50 years, chances are any foundational issues have probably already happened as far as soil-based movement goes. Not to say they can't happen, not to say you can't have issues, but I think the longevity of it. You know, if you're buying a resale home in the South or East Austin area that's maybe 3 to 5 years old, then yeah, I'd probably want to do a little bit more research into, what kind of tests were done and this, how, understanding that, if it's a resale in a community, you're probably not going to have a test hole that was dug on your exact property like you would build in your lot. Like building your lot, like we're doing it, we stake out the home and we try to go right to the heart of the home, right to the center of where the home's going to be, and that's where we want our test hole to be because we want to understand that's the maximum weight that foundation is going to be carrying at that point. So we want to make sure that we have that part dialed in. Ask those questions from your real estate agent or master plan community or your sales consultant, even in a new community, and what was done.
Am I understanding you to say that if someone were interested in purchasing a resale home in a community, let's say the homes were 3 to 5 years old, that there would be an advantage of having another soil sample done after the home's already
No, but just understanding what was done.
Well, okay, I got you.
Yeah,
I'm following. I just wanted, because I didn't quite get that. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just, I think it's knowledge is power. I mean, you do a home inspection report, right? And they're going to point out every single nail pop, every single sheetrock or insulation in the attic that's not done, that's not fastened properly. I mean, it's going to be an 80-something page report of all the stuff that's wrong. But they never really go into the depths of how the foundation was designed or anything like that when all of that rests on the foundation. So I mean, I think that it's definitely something that most people don't think about. Certainly something I never thought about until I got into the industry.
How would one get that kind of information?
You may not be able to, but it's worth asking the question. It's finding out what's going on in this neighborhood. The home plans should be on file, and if they needed beams or deep beams, reinforced beams, asking questions like that. Like, did this home require a reinforced beam? Did it require piers? So like I said, the beams are going to be cut into the earth. We're going to go at least 12 inches into virgin soil at a minimum, sometimes 24, sometimes 36 inches, just depending on what we feel. Because you do have engineered filled dirt that is brought to the foundation. Once it's framed up, once the form boards are framed up, we bring a specialty fill dirt in there, and then we create, on top of the natural soil, these kind of boxes or blocks that are then covered in plastic that then the foundation's poured over that because that creates that checkerboard.
Well, thank you so much for explaining that. That has been extremely helpful today. I know I found it useful. I'm sure a lot of folks out here have as well. Before we wrap this up, do you have any other thoughts or anything else you might want to pass along?
Yeah, I just would say that if you're looking at purchasing land right now, do your research and find out if there's any geological reports that have been done in the area. And if you find a lot, like I would say definitely in like the South Austin, East Austin area where you have more expansive soils, just dive a little deeper into the price of the land. Because there's no such thing as really like a great deal on land. There's good deals, but if everybody's selling land, an acre lot for $100,000 here, $100,000 there, and of course location's going to, like convenience factor and all that stuff, but call it 2 equals. Both lots are 45 minutes from downtown Austin. This one's 40,000, this one's 80,000. Well, it could be that the seller of this one knows it's an expansive soils issue and that you're going to have a lot of reinforcements done on your home. This one just, it is because it's built in, you're not going to have that. Ultimately, trying to do any sort of geological research would behoove you.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. If you had any ideas about how we might improve these videos or topics that we might do in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. You can leave comments below or send an email directly. Our contact information is in the video description, so feel free to reach out to either one of us. Once again, thanks for watching, and let's make your real estate dreams come true.